Intensity techniques like force reps do not cause muscle growth most of the time. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today, but a quick reminder, if you guys will please click like down below. Be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed or following, please do so. And if you have any experience at all using any of these intensity techniques, good or bad, please feel free to chime in down below. I would greatly appreciate that. So thank you so much. Now let's get over and talk about this of why I generally promote straight sets. And when I say intensity techniques don't cause muscle growth most of the time, doesn't mean never, and it doesn't mean particularly say for really serious competitive bodybuilders. The ironic part is in some cases that is the biggest exception to the rule. Okay, and I'm going to get into why. And people say, what do you mean? Well, because when they go on heavy doses of magical supplements, and you guys know what those are, that actually might be the time where those intensity techniques do work through biological mechanisms that we understand. Make sense? So when people say, well, how can you say they don't work when this Mr. Olympia did them? And it's like, because he was using lots of drugs and it can work really, really well. But if you're drug free, they're probably not going to do much of anything. And I want to explain why. This is a case of people need to have an understanding. So when you think of muscle growth and you think in terms of both what causes muscle failure and what happens with muscle growth, I want people to think of a couple of factors. And when you understand this, it will be a light bulb clicking on. Okay, there's going to be a light bulb that clicks on as to why. Oh, that's why they make you grow when people are using stuff. Okay, so when we are gaining muscle, what happens? Why do we have diminished returns? Meaning the longer you train, the slower and slower and slower you grow, right? That first 6 months in the gym, guys, that beautiful honeymoon period, you grow like a weed, especially if you train hard. Man, if you're regularly adding weight to the bar or the dumbbell and you're eating enough protein and everything else, what happens? You make phenomenal gains, right? Everyone, we call them noob gains for a reason, right? They're called noob gains for a reason. And most of us experience those, and you guys know what I'm talking about. It's like, yeah, it is. It's like magic, right? It literally is like magic. It's like that honeymoon period. Why is that? Because most of your muscle fibers are capable of growing, okay? Remember, guys, we don't have just slow twitch and fast twitch. We have about 20 types of various fibers, starting from the slowest twitch fibers that you use to walk and to do minor small movements, all the way up to the fastest twitch is what you lift fairly intense sets or max weight with, but even fairly intense sets, right? So, I mean, if you're doing a 10 rep set close to failure, you're absolutely using those fast twitch fibers. Everyone understand this? Even if the weight's moving slow, you're using those fastest twitch fibers. Okay, the growth potential is different for different fiber types. The slower the twitch of a fiber, the less potential for growth it has. This makes sense? Not just in terms of maximum size, but how long it will grow. And it really is tied to that maximum size. So what you find is that different muscle fiber types at certain months will kind of just stop growing. Up through that chain of, about 15 to 20 subtypes, there's over a dozen, okay? And a lot of them, those more intermediate ones, as you get closer to the fast twitch and the fastest twitch ones, they grow less and less and less with every month and year, okay? To the point where I saw one study that showed that for advanced lifters, like people who had more than 3 years of consistent serious training, like 85% of the muscle growth that they made came purely from the fastest twitch fibers. Whereas when you're starting out as a novice, even those slow twitch fibers make up about half of your growth. So the longer you train, see where we're going? We get to where the fast twitch fibers are 85%, and eventually you'll reach a point where they're probably 95% of your muscle growth or more. Okay, see where I'm about to go? When you reach muscle failure, why do you fail? Because the fast twitch fibers can't fire anymore. Okay, that's why it's like when you, and they get used on all your really heavy work, obviously, but what about an 8 rep set or a 10 or a 12 rep set, a 15 rep set? They're only used in about the last 4, 5, 6 reps or so. They only get used there. All your intermediate fibers are able to handle a lighter load till they get fatigued. And then you get to those fast twitch fibers. This is why getting close to muscle failure is really good for muscle growth, right? We're getting to the fibers that are capable of doing most of the growth. When you reach muscle failure, the fast twitch fibers are too fatigued to keep going. They just stop firing. They shut off. Okay, and that's why it takes several minutes to replicate being able to do it again. And if you try to do any other work, the fast twitch fibers don't turn on. This is why a lot of the studies have found really optimal growth starts happening past 2 to 3 minutes of rest between sets. Okay, and they found that if you lose performance set to set because the breaks are too short, you just grow less. You grow less. You gain less muscle. Right, it's been found in multiple studies at this point, and that's why, because those fast twitch fibers aren't firing. So if you reached muscle failure, let's say you're doing a 10 rep set and you hit failure, you get 10, and then the 11th rep it just gives out. Okay, the fast twitch fibers need 2 or 3 minutes, maybe more in some cases, before they'll reactivate. So if you're doing forced reps, are they firing again? No. People are like, what if you just do a drop set? They'll be lighter weight, and then they won't turn back on. The reason you can still lift the lighter weight still is those intermediate fibers are doing all the work. Same thing on a forced rep. The same thing with rest pause. Because you're not using a 5 rep max on the rest pause, are you? You're usually using a heavier weight, right? Okay. So on all these intensity techniques, what's happening? You're back to the intermediate fibers. Well, they're not growing anymore. So people say, well, how come some of these bodybuilders get a lot out of them? Because it's in a given hormonal environment. In other words, once those fibers are exposed to high levels of anabolic substances beyond what's like, let's say your testosterone is your normal amount, but then what happens if someone starts doubling or tripling or fourfold what their body's producing? Well, yeah, now you're going to get a new hormonal environment that's going to allow some of those intermediate fibers to start growing again. Okay, the same thing anytime you go on a big cycle or people up the dose or they add new anabolic substances, what happens? You're going to have some growth potential for the intermediate fibers again. Okay, so stuff that works those intermediate fibers is still it's going to be muscle growth involved with them potentially. And I'm not saying the force reps are going to be better. I'm only saying that they're capable of causing growth. And what I'm saying is these things don't cause any growth once you've kind of gone through that novice period, right? They're not really growing from any of that. But you're reintroducing a new novice period whenever you go on stuff. Okay, do we all understand this? It's like noob gains all over again. Every time you redo it or someone does another cycle or they add more, it's like noob gains again, but later down the road. Okay, so in the same response, a lot of times you're like, but this bodybuilder, when he's getting ready for that show, he did a bunch of those and he got bigger. Well, yeah, because he's on all that stuff. And of course, there's going to be a synergy there. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.